that, and I know a few people might listen to this on replay. So, yeah, good to see everybody again. Obviously, like MB said, it's been a few weeks since we done one of these. Um, so, obviously, putting together my thoughts still, and I'm sure everybody is on what John Durham's doing, and what the status of RussiaGate is broadly speaking. And as I look at what we know, I don't see Durham having all the answers whenever he actually gets done. And one of the last things that anybody's able to do is actually predict the status of John Durham. There's public reports out there that he's done, but, you know, it's really unclear right now. I mean, he could certainly open up another grand jury. He could go for another year or two. And as I started thinking about like the investigations, especially now that we have the House and we don't have the Senate, so you're not looking at getting like a bunch of legislation passed, right? It's going to be, set up for 2 years of investigations. Saw today that the House Republicans are really keying in on Hunter Biden stuff, which I think is just dumb, quite honestly. Yeah, there's probably some substance there. There's probably influence peddling, maybe some tax evasion, maybe some money laundering, and maybe Joe Biden is implicated. But the truth is, nobody cares. I mean, that stuff's been reported on for like 2 years. So, what are you going to come up with that, um, you know, is going to be worth throwing that out there like that? And I think they lost points today, being that that was like the first thing they've done. Right? They just officially took back the House yesterday, and literally the first thing they do is come out and announce they're going to investigate Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, and it just smacks of like political desperation, right? It looks like a revenge ploy and not a substantive investigation. And I even saw a note in one of the write ups where they're talking about they're going to have regular updates for the press, and it's like that is the worst presentation of an investigation ever. Like it's just on the face of it, it's politically motivated. It's not really in the oversight function of what they're supposed to be doing. And at the end of the day, I don't think Joe Biden's going to run again. I don't think he's going to win again. And given that everybody's going to see it as a political smear campaign, you're not getting a whole lot of value out of it. Like I said, there might be merit to some of those allegations, but it just doesn't move the ball at all. And in that context, Rushgate has been like the big passion project, right? That's what a lot of us, brings in a lot of us together to look at. So obviously, our bias is probably towards that anyway. But it's like there is a mountain of questions for Russiagate that remain unanswered, and I'm beside myself most days at how little press attention it's gotten, especially with what we've learned over the last 6, 7, 8 months. The media's not picking it up, but then the House Republicans aren't picking it up. I don't see them out there even talking about it, which is inexcusable because there are some real questions out there. And as I was kind of getting into earlier, I don't think John Durham's going to have all the answers, right? His report's going to be somewhat limited. It's going to be subject to redactions. Um, you know, Anything that relates to sources and methods is going to be redacted. And you can sort of circumvent that, right? If the House Republicans put together something right now and really get their ducks in a row, they can go out there and start getting answers. So, maybe Durham's done in 2 or 3 months. Maybe his report comes out in 6 months. And then you're going to read it, and then you might want to throw out subpoenas. And it's like, well, you're going to have a fight. Everybody that you might be interested in is not going to just hand over the documents. And you only have 2 years before the next election. So if you want to do something that's impactful, you have to do it right at the jump. I mean, you only have 2 years. So you have to walk in there and you have to know who you're going to subpoena and what you're looking for. And there's plenty of information out there to start putting that together. But, you know, obviously the big point for me is that the same group of researchers, Rodney Joffe, Manos Antonakakis, David Dagan, and a large group of associated researchers were all involved in this Alpha Bank allegation stuff. And the data has been shown by experts or been testified to by many experts to be fabricated, to be false, to be manipulated. And that then you have at least some of those same researchers who ended up working for Special Counsel Mueller. I just got new documents a couple weeks ago on this. They worked for Mueller. And I'm not misspeaking. I don't mean anybody else. I mean Special Counsel Mueller um, was was taking in work product from these guys via DARPA. Now I don't know what that means. Okay, there was some type of information laundering process where it went from the researchers to DARPA, and then DARPA sent it to Mueller. I don't know why that's set up, but that's one of the questions that has to be answered, right? So all of a sudden, you have these researchers that gave work product to the Clinton campaign, right? They didn't stumble across data and then take it to the FBI or any of their law enforcement contacts. The massive number of contacts they had throughout the government. They didn't go to those guys. They ended up taking it to the Clinton campaign and ultimately, coordinating with Fusion GPS to push to the media. And they started working with the New York Times reporter. They started working with the Slate reporter. And that's where they felt like they should push that information. And that tells you a lot about their motivations. So to see that same group of researchers going and working for Special Counsel Mueller and having a role in the attribution for the DNC hack is a massive, massive red flag for me. I don't know if they did anything wrong on the attribution for the DNC hack. I can't tell you that they did something wrong on the DNC hack. But the fact that their motivations are suspect, their work product is highly suspect, bordering on fabricated, whether they knew or whether they should have known that data was fabricated for the Alpha Bank stuff. Maybe they're incompetent. I don't know. Maybe there's an argument there. But somehow they ended up working for Special Counsel Mueller, and I think the evidence is clear. They're the ones that attributed the hack to Russia. I think they're the ones that picked out the 12 GRU operatives. I think those 12 operatives were indicted by Mueller, and I think to this day they're still under indictment because of Rodney Joffe, Manos Antonakakis, and or David Dagan. And that needs to be explained. You can't just walk away from that. And this is where I think the Durham report has a high bar. Like there's going to be a lot of problems because all of a sudden these guys are confidential human sources for the FBI, and Durham has not charged them with misconduct. So they remain sources and methods that are going to be subject to redaction in a Durham report. So that's one of the other reasons. That's one of the reasons why the House Republicans got to jump on this now. They need to put these subpoenas together. You can put together 200 or 300 subpoenas based on what we know and start getting those out there. You're going to need documents. You're going to need testimony. You're going to need all these guys to come in and tell you, what the hell is going on. David Dagan had an immunity deal. He can't fight you on that. So bring David Dagan in. Laura Seago, she had an immunity deal. So bring her in. Let's hear what she has to say as well. And then you have so many different contacts, right? And there's so many different angles. And I'm telling you right now, Durham report is not going to have it all. We saw in May, as late as May 2022, he still hadn't gotten all the emails from Fusion GPS. And nobody can tell you right now whether or not he got them. So why not, hey, House Republicans, go out there, put those subpoenas together, and you start fighting that battle, right? They threw up a lot of privilege claims that Durham was fighting. Well, you can bull them over, right? Like, go get them yourself. Don't wait for Durham. Like I said, I don't know if he's going to be done next week. I don't know if his report's going to be out in 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. Go out there and put the work in. Yeah, it's a lot of information, but there's going to be a lot of questions. And especially when you start looking at the people that have been following this. Senator Grassley, outstanding. Senator Johnson, outstanding. Unfortunately, we didn't take the Senate back. So those guys are not going to be out there. They don't have subpoena power. So they have to download all that knowledge that they've attained into the House Republicans. And I can't pick out a House Republican that I have confidence in. I'm sorry to say, guys, like I can't pick out one House Republican that's like, yeah, that's the guy, right? He's the one that has all information. He's been following this. I don't know who that is in the House. Devin Nunes, unfortunately, he moved on. Otherwise, I would have said Devin Nunes there. But you know, it's too much information to go and read the Durham report and then go out there and try to figure things out. Like that's why I'm really upset is like you have to be on this, right? And if you don't have the information, then you need to call up Devin Nunes. You need to call up the right people and put this together now so that in January you walk in there and you drop 200 subpoenas. You know there's going to be a fight, but there's so many questions. You talk about, what the hell is going on in DARPA. That's not just Russiagate, guys. They were doing other criminal investigations. I know the Tree of Life synagogue shooting. All of a sudden the DOJ and the FBI are going through DARPA, and that tasking went from DARPA to Manos and Tanakakis. Now, I'm not saying, there's nothing wrong there that I know of, right? Other than the open question of like, why the hell is that going to DARPA? DARPA is supposed to be like this research entity inside the Department of Defense. They do not have an investigative role. That is not their mission. So that doesn't make sense. And there's a lot of questions like that where it's like, okay, yeah, they did all this shady stuff as it relates to Trump and as it relates to Russiagate, but the questions are much broader, right? They go far beyond Russiagate. I remember documents that I got about a year ago where, the CenturyLink, head of that, I forgot the title, Bill Bradley, I think was his name. He walked in there to Manos and Tanakakis, and he's like, offering all his customers' data to Manos and the Department of Defense through DARPA to analyze all their data, right? To monitor it or data mine it. And it's like, wait a minute, the customers know about that. There's so many offshoots like that. And, Durham is probably not investigating that, right? If anything, maybe Durham threw out a referral for that, but that's another avenue. Like, are people being spied on without their consent? How about Ops Trust? Margot Cleveland broke that story. It must be 8 or 9 months ago now. Ops Trust was a secret community where, a highly secretive community of, technology executives, government officials that was set up. And then they unilaterally decide to share their customers' data, to share some attack patterns that they're experiencing, some hackers activity like that. But who the hell is overseeing that, right? I want to see some subpoenas. I want to see those guys called to the stand. I want to see what the hell's going on there and what information flows are going back and forth. I know of some allegations of certain uses of that forum to communicate matters that related to Alpha Bank. So yeah, throw some subpoenas out there. There's people all over the world. You're going to have trouble with that. So get those subpoenas out there, and like that, you just have to, right? You just have to have this put together before you go in there in January. So, MB, I don't know if you want to jump in. I kind of went long-winded on that one. I'll add King here too.
No, that was great, and I think it really nailed the problem that we're going to see right now. This thing has developed in so many branches, so many different facets that are honestly far outside of what Durham was charged with initially to do. That I'm sure we've all seen how Congress sort of works with these oversight committees, and it's just not going to be possible to. I mean, for them to drill down on any one thing is really hard because they all just want to, talk and be heard and get on TV. So, you have to keep your expectations managed when you're dealing with the congressional committee, especially in the House. And honestly, I think maybe that's maybe that's something tonight that we can discuss a little bit is what do we think is the most important things that we would like to see come out of this, that the House could get on and the House could work on, assuming they're going to take this up. And I will say that I think politically, once the Durham, I'm not as negative as you are on Dead right now about what the House is going to do. I do agree that the time issue is a real thing, is a big deal, but I'm not surprised they're not talking about Russiagate right now, and that there's other things that politically have kind of taken over. But when Durham's report does come out, and especially if there ends up being some fighting back and forth, which I expect, of what is going to be released and what isn't, which I'm very sure that they're not just going to drop everything and let the chips fall. And I think Durham might, how Durham reacts to that, if he comes out in the media and says, "Look, they're basically, putting all this stuff under the rug that needs to be come out to the country." And I think it could get to that point, or to the point where the House has to start subpoenaing things. If there's a big fight there, it's a big political thing. There's a lot of sparks flying, and that's what the House responds to. So if that becomes, headline news again, then the House is all of a sudden going to go, "Yep, it's time that this is what we want to talk about because it's it's in the news." And so I fully expect we'll get back to that. So I do think though that we should, like, in our own way, give some ideas of, all right, what are the documents that we need to see that are the most important? What are the the witnesses that are most important? And I think that I was just looking at Stephen McIntyre's was just commenting that the Durham's charge was to investigate the DOJ and the FBI and their potential wrongdoing and their decision making. And we're so far away from that now because Durham really hasn't gone down that road very much that we have seen. And a lot of us expect, all right, the report is mostly going to pivot back to that. And I think that's very likely true. But this comes down to people have different perspectives and people have different priorities. I think we can all agree that any kind of corruption in the DOJ, FBI should be at the top of the list. Any politicization, we've seen plenty of it. That all needs to be exposed. So maybe that needs to be front and center, and everything else go by the wayside. I'm a big civil rights and anti-surveillance state advocate. So for me, I'd love to see, DARPA and some of these things come up, that all the spying going on domestically. That I'd love to see that, but I do agree with the point that we can't do everything all in one day, and we probably have to narrow our focus here, or the House is going to have to. That's just the reality of it. So, I guess that's kind of where I'm at with this.
I mean, it's not just going to be documents. I mean, I want to hear people testify. I want to see President Obama called in, and I want to hear his testimony, specifically on what he was told, as July 2016. I want to hear about early August as Crossfire Hurricane was getting underway. I want to hear what they told him about Carter Page and what they told him about the Trump campaign. I want to hear what they told him about the Russians that were supposedly doing this hacking. And I want to hear what they, talked about as far as an influence campaign. And then going into December, and they're putting together the ICA, how was that put together? What was being communicated to President Obama in early January when the dossier was going to come out? What did they tell Obama? And leading into the inauguration, why did Susan Rice write that cover your ass email about doing things the right way? That's very, very odd. Like, I don't want to see documents. I want to hear testimony. And I don't think Durham has gone down that road at all. So that's where you're not duplicating what Durham has done. You're probably going out there and you're getting new information. And it's not a political hit job. Like, I'm not looking to make a circus out of bringing in the president, the former president, just for political purposes. Like, it has to be a serious investigation. And literally, I just want to know, what did they tell him? And then you talk about John Brennan and the fusion cell. Are there connections to some of these researchers? What is the extent of the researchers' connections to the NSA and the CIA? I have some indications that they have connections to both. How bad is it, right? You see the entities for Joffe that were recently in the news, measurement systems and trust core, in some type of spying arrangements where they're surreptitiously collecting data on users that were using various apps. What's the story on that? Like, I I I I just don't want it to be a year from now, and then they're like, oh, we're going to invite people in, and oh, they don't want to agree to come in, so maybe we'll send in a subpoena, and all of a sudden they're fighting the subpoena, and then it's the 2024 election, and it's like, oh, we're creeping into the election, everything's going to be politically tainted that you want to drop in public, and everybody's trying to push it up for the election. Like, it's been 6.5 years. It's long enough. Like, you don't have to wait on John Durham. John Durham's been at it 3.5 years. You don't have to worry about interfering with his investigation right now. If he hasn't filed any indictments, I don't think he's going to file any more indictments right now. Like, I think he's wrapping up. So, like, you send the subpoenas out there, and you get to read a lot more. Whatever's in John Durham's report, you're not going to see the underlying documents. The grand jury material that is still sequestered for the 12 GRU agents. I want to send subpoenas out there. Like, that is not an indictment or a prosecution that will ever happen. You're never going to get those guys extradited. I think there's a mountain of evidence in there that is going to look very bad for the government. And I don't think any of that will be in Durham's report. So I don't know. I'm sort of repeating the same things. But
Well, let me just add one thing that is
yeah,
good news, bad news. The Republicans don't get the gavel until January. So we've got a couple of months here, and I would definitely expect Durham's report, if not before the end of the year, beginning of next year. So this all might happen sort of simultaneously. And I 100% agree that I hope that Jim Jordan and Daryl Issa are out there like really thinking this stuff through and thinking of what kind of subpoenas they can get together as soon as they, have the power to do it. I don't know if that's realistic, but I hope that they are. And some other congressmen that I know follow this stuff and think it's important. So I do have high hopes. And I kind of have the feeling that Durham may wait until the new Congress sits before he sends his report in. That may help his case. I don't know how exactly the mechanics of that work. I know King's looked at that a little bit as far as what the actual law says regarding the special counsel's office. So I think a lot of things are going to happen in January really fast that might surprise us.
yeah, that's a fair point. King, I see you're a speaker. I don't know if you want to jump in with any thoughts that you have.
I hate to rain on parades, but I heard the Republican game plan today. They're very public about it. They've got 3 major investigations that they want to run. One is the border. The other is the origins of COVID. And the third is the Biden family and Hunter Biden and the laptop. And that last one has 2 components. One is the Oversight Committee, which is looking at the Biden family corruption, is what I'll call it, corruption and influence peddling. And the other component is Jim Jordan's Judiciary Committee, which will be looking at the the role of the FBI and law enforcement in covering it up. And to that, I would add Jordan's FBI whistleblowers. No mention of Russiagate, Mueller, Durham. I think the Republican powers that be have decided on their tack, what path they're going to go down as far as major investigations. They don't see this as one. I think if we have any hope of getting it to up into somebody's attention where they want to investigate it, it's going to have to be through the Judiciary Committee, because it fits Durham's task in that he was assigned, which is to investigate the FBI, the wrongdoing by the FBI and DOJ in Russiagate. And none of the indictments he brought really addressed that head on. Presumably his report will, but that does fit within the Judiciary Committee's jurisdiction. So if it's a strong report, or if somebody knows somebody on Jordan's committee with some stroke, maybe we can squeeze that in. But right now it's a long shot.
Well, I see it the same way. I think you're spot on. I think they laid out what their priorities are going to be. And the fact that they omitted any mention of Russiagate told me like it's not going to be a focus for them. And, I have talked to some people that are in DC that work in Capitol Hill, and they told me, they're like, yeah, nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about Russiagate. So that was like another indication to me, like it's totally off their radar. And that's the part that really upset me. And that's why I scheduled this chat. It's like, it has to be like, this is far more important than what Hunter Biden was doing. This is more important than, what's happening at the border, as bad as that is. And it's, the COVID stuff, there's plenty of interest out there. Like somebody's going to get to the bottom of that. I think it's pretty clear. There's plenty of evidence that's already in the public for discussion. But like this is big. This dominated the news cycle for 3 years. Everything's, every single night we had to suffer through CNN saying, the walls are closing in, Trump's going to have to resign, and there's a whole generation of people that still believe that there's Russian collusion, despite the evidence that's already in the public. And one of the big things that really, really bothers me is that we've known for like 8 months now that these same guys that did make the news to some extent for their work in the Alpha Bank stuff, they're also associated with the DNC hack investigation. They're also associated with the attribution for the hack. And they work directly for Mueller. And it's like, how do you not elevate that? Like, I don't even know if the House Republicans know that. I honestly don't. I don't think they know as much as us. And that's unacceptable, because if they do know as much as us, it has to be a priority, because there's just too many open questions. And, who knows? Maybe Durham finds, another reason to open a grand jury. Maybe he's not done a year from now. Maybe he's not done 2 years from now. Do you really want to go into another election without having the answers? And the only way you can say yes to that is if you don't know what's going on. And by them omitting any mention of Russiagate, that tells me like they don't know what's going on. So what do I have to do? Like, do I have to write 200 letters to all the GOP congressmen? Do I have to write, 200 letters a week and send them in until people start reading them? Do I have to email? Do I have to call them? How do I get this information into their hemisphere? Like what would it have to take? It shocks the hell out of me that people would want to move on, because there are crimes in Russiagate. There are absolutely crimes. I don't know if Durham's going to be able to prosecute them, right? He's had a lot of trouble just on false statements, but there are absolutely crimes. And if you're looking for a political win, and that seems to be what they're going for Hunter Biden. I mean, they're just looking for political points. Go to Russiagate. I mean, that is the number one issue I would go to if I was just looking for political points. But if you're actually serious about accountability, like, start reading the documents, right? I just don't understand how they could omit any mention of Russiagate. Yeah, it's not in the public conversation right now. I talk about, the House Republicans probably don't know as much as us sleuths know. Well, the American public doesn't either. And that's where, the House Republicans have to adapt. They have to have that knowledge, just be like, well, okay, like it's not in the public mindset. They're not emailing us about this because they don't know, but they have to take some responsibility and like start putting together information. And you know what? You can hammer the Democrats. Like if that's all you want, if you're just like a scumbag who doesn't care about anything but political wins and elections and shit, fine. Like, okay, that's fine. Use this for political purposes. I don't care what your motivations are, but there has to be some real accountability. There has to be some disclosures. I mean, hell, we just found out a couple weeks ago that Igor Danchenko was a paid confidential human source. Like well after the IG Horowitz report came out, right? They hid him from Devin Nunes in March 2017 by making him a paid CHS, and they kept him on the payroll, right? The IG Horowitz report dropped in December 2019, and they kept paying him. They kept him on the payroll to continue hiding them. So, like, mere exposure is probably not enough. Like, you need to put them on the witness stand and have them talk about it. We just saw the Democrats do this for January 6th stuff. I don't know if it had any impact on the election, but like, fine. Like if you want a bunch of airtime, you want to, play your games with it or whatever, like you're going to do with Hunter Biden stuff, fine. Have some prime time hearings, throw people up there, embarrass them, do whatever. That's not what I'm after. I'm after like the actual answers. But, whatever your motivations are, there's plenty of stuff here. And I don't know if it's like QAnon. I don't know if it's like a bunch of, thousands or maybe hundreds of people that are emailing talking about military tribunals and whatever QAnon, garbage that is. I don't know if that's what's turning them off. I don't know, if Russiagate, like the mention of Russiagate is just like a non-starter for them now because it's been ruined, or they just wave their hand at it. Like there is some substantive issues. Like I've mentioned several times now, the fact that you have the same people being involved in the Mueller investigation, that should be enough. I don't know if they did anything wrong on the DNC hack. I don't know that, but that is just, you have to ask that questions. You just have to, and you go. I could do this all night, right? We could go topic by topic. We still have so many questions about Group IB and Ilya Sachkov and Sergei Mikhailov and what role they had with the attribution to the GRU and what their motivations might have been. They're sitting in a Russian jail tonight. Don't they deserve? Some attention on why they're in a jail? Like apparently they had some ties to U.S. intelligence, and we're just leaving them in jail. Like there's no oversight hearing on that. Like apparently we didn't protect those sources and methods, right? But we're going to get this Durham report, and I think it's going to be redacted in certain places that are probably unacceptable. So I don't know. MB,
Yeah.
King, you guys have anything else?
Yeah, Undead, I'm going to walk you off the ledge here. And here's how
walk me off the ledge.
Because I'm telling you,
back to the roof or just let me drop.
No. Listen, politically, don't worry about what the Republicans are talking about right now. The Republicans in Congress is going to go where the heat is. And when this Durham report drops, it's going to be a bigger deal than any of the Hunter stuff right now, any other stuff. And I'm not saying that because of our bias toward this. I'm saying because that's just a Washington fact that you're bringing in a special counsel's report. It's a big deal. It's nonpartisan. This is coming out of the Justice Department. This is going to be something that John Durham is going to testify in front of Congress, right? Did the Republicans mention anything about that in their platform or their planning? No, because it's just baked into the cake. It's going to happen. They're going to interview John Durham. He is going to do what Mueller did but he's going to be coherent, and he is going to be very sharp, and he's going to give a whole bunch of information. Now, that is going to be where the fire is. That's going to be front page of New York Times. That's going to be, CNN kind all the mainstream media, they can't ignore this stuff. So once that happens, I fully believe, and I think this is going to be proven out is that that's where the interest will lie, and Congress will go where the interest lies. That's where the hearings are going to be. They're going to hear things that are going to go. You're going to hear this probably 100 times when Durham testifies. Well, we're going to have to get to the bottom of that. We're going to have hearings. We're going to want to talk to that person. I fully believe that's how this is going to go down. So don't worry about what they're saying right now. They're saying about they're talking politics. They're laying out their what they think their schedule is going to be. Circumstances are going to dictate what their schedule is going to be.
Yeah, but what if it's not done by January? I mean, that is my big concern. Maybe Durham's done now. For all I know, that's entirely possible. But what if the Department of Justice, politicized as it is under Garland, what if they just slow walk the redaction process? What if they drag that out by 6 or 7 months? That's entirely possible, and that's like the point I keep making. Like that's why you have to jump on this in January, and you have to take responsibility for it as the House Republicans to know the information that's publicly available right now and start throwing out those subpoenas.
Well, can we?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but can we bring in King here to talk about how this process is supposed to work? Because once Durham closes out his investigation, delivers his report to the Attorney General, how is that how is that going to go down? Is there any reason that Congress can't decide, hey, well, you're stonewalling us. Well, we want to talk to John Durham, so let's bring John Durham in and let's because I mean, Jim Jordan's not going to sit there and just go, oh, well, Attorney General says we can't have this stuff and we can't talk about it, and I'm not getting the report that the law says I'm due. It's not. That's what I'm talking about. When that kind of stuff happens, that's when people start getting upset and Congress starts getting interested.
I agree with that 100%. I think the strategy should be to do what they used to say, have the camel get his nose inside the tent. You've got to get Jordan's attention before all this comes to pass. Somebody has to convince him that thread by Stephen McIntyre outlines the worst abuse by the FBI and other intel agencies than anything he is talking about, investigating. It's worse than Hunter Biden. It's worse than what the whistleblowers are talking about. It needs addressing, and he has in mind painting a bullseye on Chris Wray and the upper echelons at the FBI, and that story of how the FBI has reached a dead end and they knew their investigation against Trump was over. They nevertheless hid from the DOJ and from Congress what they had learned about how phony it all had been. And they pursued a plan to get the DOJ and Congress to jump on the bandwagon to let them keep investigating. And that happened early in Trump's administration. Very as soon as Sessions recused, that was their plan. And Comey pulled it off. And that's a story that needs to be told. And if it's told to the right people on Jordan's committee, we may have our nose in the tent.
Hey, can I just throw in a quick thought, an overview of what I think the biggest hurdle is? Pretty quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, and just bear with me just for a second. I think if you look at how the RNC and both houses of Congress feel about Trump, and they made that pretty clear and evident in this midterm election with the assistance or lack of assistance to certain candidates in certain areas, and they bunged it up so bad. Whether it was on purpose or not, that's debatable. But they almost didn't win the House, and probably one of the easiest to win midterm elections ever because of everything that's so horribly wrong with the country right now. And I think that's a point that you really can't argue. So they weren't interested in helping the MAGA side of the party or the Trump side of the party. And I think as we look at everything that you guys have talked about is 100% true. There are criminal elements to this thing. There are things that just need to be shouted at the mountaintop. But to that end, I believe and I feel like if they do that, if they put a committee on that, if they show a lot of focus on it, and then if they actually put together a credible report and issue some subpoenas and come up with a smoking gun or don't come up with a smoking gun, but what they do come up with ends up benefiting Trump and say, hey, this Russiagate thing, look, this was meant to harm Donald J. Trump, and it did harm them. The power of our government, of the intelligence agencies, of the political side of our government, of the executive branch of our government, went after our president and harmed him and literally tried to take him out. I think that ends up being a boost and a help to Trump, who is now running for president of the United States. And I don't think it takes me to tell everybody that there's not a lot of people on Capitol Hill that are super happy about that, and certainly not in Congress. And there are some who are actively dead set against him doing it. So I think, you know, really nailing this Russiagate thing down would be overall beneficial news to Trump. And I don't think they're excited about that. I think this Hunter Biden laptop thing, I think they want to show that they can go after a portion of that, you know, whether that was suppressive and keeping, you know, voters away from the polls by holding it back and voter suppression. Maybe they'll take that angle a little bit, but I don't think they're going to go to the Russiagate thing because that's obviously harmful to Trump, which if they proved that or made it evident to everyone, it would be beneficial to Trump. And I don't think there's an appetite for that in either house of Congress.
That's a really good point. Honestly,
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah, I think that's a shiny thing. The Hunter Biden laptop 2 years later.
100%, Willie.
MB, did you have anything else, or King?
No, I hadn't thought of Mitt's point, and that's really worrisome that Trump being involved in this being involved in the election could be a good reason for a lot of people in Congress not to want anything to do with it. And that is too bad because while Trump is the victim of this isn't really about Trump. It's about our government and much, much bigger picture than just one candidate or one president. That this could happen again and again. And I hope that Congress is smart enough to realize that if it happened to Donald Trump, it could happen to any of them, any of us. And that's really what's important here.
That was my point about the camel's nose under the tent. Jordan has the FBI, the higher echelons of the FBI, in his sights, and he said it today. It's partly, to bring them to account, and partly to produce some legislation that cuts their wings so they can't do that again. And what is that? Well, that is a whole lot more than the Hunter Biden laptop. The story about how they took after Trump and then hid it from Congress for all those years is as compelling or more compelling than the Hunter Biden laptop story. It's part of the same scheme, the same design. And you don't have to even talk about Trump to get that into the public sphere. And it just cries out for somebody on our side to talk to anybody they know in the House Judiciary Committee to give us an audience with your staff, your legal staff. Let us make the case here to show you why you're overlooking one of your strongest points and the public really needs to know what happened.
Well, I really like that second point that you just made, King. I think it goes to the first point though, because as it relates to the calculus of whether this would help Trump or hurt Trump, I don't think that's a consideration right now, because I don't think that any of the House Republicans are following this. Like, I don't think they know as much as we do. Certainly in the Senate, that would have been a lot better for us, because Senator Grassley, Senator Johnson, they certainly do follow this. I know they've been writing a lot of letters, and they've been staying on top of this. You can see that over the last few years. But unfortunately, we didn't take back the Senate, so it falls to the House Republicans, and I just don't see it. Like, I don't think they know, like, any of the stuff that we've been talking about tonight. I don't think they know that these guys were involved with Mueller, and that should be enough. Like, if they knew that the same group was involved in the DNC hack attribution, and they were providing work product directly to Special Counsel Mueller through DARPA, as the case may be, like, that should be enough. And that, like, we have to be careful, right? Because there's so many lawyers circling around. Like, I don't know that any wrongdoing occurred on the DNC hack, but it's more than sufficient to raise the questions, right? You have to ask the questions to find out, are there nefarious motivations? Like, what, of all the cybersecurity researchers out there in the world, why are the same few involved in both matters? Like, how did that even come to pass? Like, who at the FBI approved that? What does that look like at DARPA? There's a lot of problems with getting FOIA documents from DARPA right now. I would love to see some of those guys called in, by the House Judiciary Committee or whatever committees that's out there, because you're just not going to get all the answers that you need in the Durham report, and you just got to get the ball rolling. And I've made this point 3 or 4 times. Like, if the Durham report comes out next week, then yeah, fine, right? The public sentiment will run its course, and certainly, John Durham will come in and testify, and then maybe there'll be a few subpoenas out there, but that seems more reactive to me, right? So maybe the report comes out, that I don't see then them using that as a full investigation. That's really what I want. I want a full investigation. I want everybody to be subpoenaed. I want everybody to come in and give testimony. I don't want a limited engagement. I don't want to see just a few follow-up points on things that the Durham report didn't quite answer fully, or questions that popped up. That's not what I want. I want to see right from the jump in January, everybody subpoenaed. And then you're protected a little bit, right? If you've done the research now to do that prep work, if Durham, his report, if it doesn't come out for a year, then you've already got the ball rolling. Stefan Halper, they tried to subpoena him like 3 or 4 years ago, and he just blew them off, apparently, right? You guys remember that, when Senator Johnson subpoenaed all those people, and they all just blew it off. And it's like, no, like, that can't happen again. We need Stefan Halper to come in, and we need to see his testimony. We're not going to see, all the underlying documentation of John Durham, and that's going to leave a lot of information out, and that's what is truly unacceptable. That's what I don't want. And yeah, they have to go out there. They have to, release documents that they have. There's plenty of transcripts that everybody knows about. On the HIPSI ICA report is one that I want to see. So yeah, I'm sure they'll make some efforts there. And yeah, public sentiment will dictate somewhat of what they do. And yeah, they might bring in a few people, but that's really not what I want. I don't want to see a political circus that they're just using for political points. Like, I want the serious investigation. I want to see everything covered. So
to have a full, or to induce the politicians to engage in a full investigation, you have to fit your case into their agenda. And right now, as best I can tell, somebody correct me if they see otherwise, the best I can tell, the Republicans' agenda may be heading towards reducing the authority of the FBI, maybe eliminating its domestic intelligence authority, spinning that off into another agency. Uh, the everything you read, you see more and more commentators calling out the FBI for the abuse that's enabled because they have both criminal investigative authority as well as domestic intelligence authority. And they're more and more, all the whistleblowers that Jordan has in his pocket are complaining about the intelligence gathering arm of the FBI and complaining to him how that function has taken over the leadership of the FBI and it's being abused through expansion of that authority as well as use of confidential human sources. Uh, you know, the Governor Whitmer kidnapping plot that started as domestic intelligence. Uh, so there's a message that we're getting from the Republicans in charge right now, and our story, our case, fits that message and helps them make it. That's how you get an investigation, a full-blown investigation set up in Congress.
Yeah, I agree with King. I will say, if to the point of trying to narrow this as opposed to widen it, if you throw the entire net over this, like you're talking about undead, we're talking. This isn't just one committee that, like the Judiciary Committee, wouldn't necessarily be involved in all these intelligence matters. And you're talking about DARPA. Then we're bringing in the Intel Committee, the Armed Service Committee, and until somebody sets up some blue ribbon, giant, um, bipartisan committee, it's too big for any one committee to handle. And so I think we'd be well served to look at, all right, what, as King said, can get the camel's nose under the tent here. The Judiciary Committee seems to be ground zero, and that is the wrongdoing the FBI, the wrongdoing, the politicization of the DOJ, the things that Durham we expect to report on. And I know we don't want to bank on waiting for that, but we may not have a choice. But I think all these other things can evolve from that. And if they're as bad as we know them to be, and they can be proven to be, all these things can sprout. I mean, I'm not old enough to remember Watergate. I'm not old enough, I was a kid when Iran-Contra happened, but these things didn't happen overnight. But once they got legs, they took off, and everybody wanted a part of it because that's what was on everybody's front of mind. That's where the heat was. And I just feel like that can happen here. We have to be somewhat patient. And I know none of us want to be patient. It's been 6 years plus, but don't despair. And, but also don't set up, things that just can't happen. I don't think that, Jim Jordan's committee is going to walk out and bring all this stuff, and drop it on the floor on the first day. That's just not the way things work.
It's got to work that way. I mean, adapt or die, right? We just saw the Democrats come out here with a highly coordinated campaign, right? They just spent a couple of years with January 6th, highly organized, very lost the word I was thinking of, but like structured, right? They had it all out. They knew exactly what they wanted to hear. Presentation was out there, primetime hearings, whatever. Like, you should be able to put that together right now. It's November. You got 2 months to plan it out. You talk about, one committee is not going to be enough for this. Well, that's why. That's what I'm talking about right now. Like, put it together so that you can get this in front of the right committees for the different elements that are out there, right? Should these guys still have federal contracts? Right? Because they do. Georgia Tech still has contracts. These guys and all their private entities, they still have contracts. You see these media reports about measurement systems and trust core over the last couple weeks. I bet you those entities still have active contracts with the federal government right now. Should they? I don't think they should. Um, there's so many different offshoots to this, and it's like, yeah, it's a massive, and I understand what you're saying, NB. Like it's going to be really hard. It would be too hard to hit the ground running on day one, but they have to. Like, if you want to do this right, like you put it together now. Talking about Hunter Biden and stuff like that is like, you just don't need it. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing substantive is going to happen with Hunter Biden. You could be using all of that time, all that energy that you're wasting, frankly, on that stuff, and put together Russiagate. And like, you don't have to run to the media and explain it and market it and whatever else. Like, you can do a serious investigation and find out what the hell is going on with our country. There in history, there have been some very important congressional investigations out there. Not recently, unfortunately. I think Devin Nunes did some really good work for the first year or two of Russiagate. I understand he was kind of stopped by the Mueller and everything else that was going on, but like, you're not subservient to the executive branch either. Like, you can fulfill your oversight function. You can go out there and figure out what is going on. And it's sort of a cynical time in our country where it's like, they're not even going to try to do legislation, right? Like there's no thought out there like, oh yeah, they're going to put together a really good education bill or, save Social Security. Like, no, that's not even on the table. We're talking about investigations. So let's go with that. Like if you're going to have 2 years of investigations because you can't, fulfill your functions in other ways, fine. Let's do the best 2 damn years of investigations you can do and get this solved. And you don't have to wait until it's in the public sphere, right? You don't have to wait for John Durham to put it out there and let it blow up in the media to pressure you into doing the right thing. Because all these guys, Jim Jordan, they've been on TV plenty over the last few years promising like they're going to get to the bottom of it, and they haven't. They paid lip service to it. They paid enough lip service to it. So you've got 2 months. You got 60 days, plenty of time. Structure the investigation. Call in the sleuths. There's nothing wrong. Stephen McIntyre, fantastic work over the past years. There's nothing wrong. Call him up. I bet you Stephen McIntyre would take that phone call. He would explain to them, some of his theories. Everybody's going to have different perspectives. Call up Fool Nelson. You've seen him break story after story. If you've been doing your due diligence on this, call up Fool Nelson. There's nothing wrong with that. Technofog, call him up. What is his perspective? What should they be looking at? Those are great questions to ask, and there's no reason that you're not asking those right now. So, I don't want to hear anything else about Hunter Biden. I don't give a damn about Hunter Biden. There might be some substance to the allegations, influence peddling. Yeah, that's fine. That's not going to move the needle. Like, there's just way too much here. You're going to wait for Durham and then read the report, and then you're going to have questions and like, no, like, learn as much as you can now. Take responsibility, as I said, and walk in there on day one with a plan and lines of inquiry that you're going to pursue, and a hell of a lot of subpoenas. Draft those subpoenas and throw them out there and anticipate that fight, and get them out there so that we don't we can put this to bed finally. So
You brought up a great point about the January 6th committee, and I think the way they did that, that's the way the Democrats operate, and I don't think that we have that on the Republican side. And one of the reasons, especially for the January 6th committee, the reason they were able to go full-throated, when they put that thing together, if you think back of the political landscape when that was happening, there were more than 20 Republican House members that supported Liz Cheney and the January 6th committee. There were a bunch that voted for Trump's impeachment. And in the Senate, there were probably 10 or 15. Now, for them to put together a January 6th type committee, the Republicans, with absolutely zero, and I mean zero support from any of the Democrats, and probably a handful of the House or a handful of the Senate and 20 to 30 Congress people dead set against it. I just don't think it would happen. I tweeted that earlier today about the Jan 6 committee, and I think maybe the reckoning, maybe on his site, about the way they do it. We wouldn't do it. We bring a knife to a gunfight, and we shouldn't be doing that. We should have these radical attorney aides assisting our Congress people that will come up with the most grandiose, wild type of subpoena and affidavit to bring somebody in that just is off the charts ridiculous, but do it. But I don't think they have the appetite for it. I don't think it's going to happen. Look at Mike McCarthy. Look at who he is. I don't think Mike McCarthy is going to go back 6 years to do a Russiagate thing. I don't think he's going to let that happen. But I think there's some other stuff that will happen. And Kingmakers, touched on it a little bit. MB did also. And it hurts me. It makes me sad to think so. But I just think that's the way it's going to go.
MB or King, I don't know if you guys have anything else. We don't necessarily have to go much longer. I feel like if I keep talking, I'm going to keep repeating myself, so I don't want to do that. But King, if you guys have anything, or MB, otherwise I'll probably wrap this one up and tweet it out so people can listen to it if they want to.
I have one thing. If we look at Mueller's team afterwards, a lot of his agents actually have become contributors and talk about their work on like CNN or MSNBC. So we could look towards after his completion and the report, like trying to talk to people like DeFlippis or I don't know, off the top of my head, but that could also be an avenue to figure out, maybe some other things.
Yeah,
That's a good point. Yeah, I'd love to talk to John DeFilippis. I'm sure he's got a ton to say, but none of this is going to happen until the Durham report comes out and all that kind of works its way through, because that's the way at least Durham Republicans operate. Not to equate the two, but his team is just locked down. But I do think that when they feel it's the correct time or the legal time or the ethical time, that they will, have a lot to say. And that'll probably be really interesting. I guess my last thing is, you guys, I think we're all saying the same things here. And Undead makes a great point that Congress does need to be on top of figuring out what they're going to do and have the game plan, even if it's not announced, even if it's not scheduled, whatever. But when this stuff is ripe, they better have their stuff together, because it's been years and the resources are there. Their people are available. If they don't know the details, the people that do know the details are available. You can go, we just went through a laundry list of who knows the facts and can deliver them to you, and we'd be more than happy to for no charge. We talk about this stuff all the time for free, and we'd love to just bend somebody's ear and say, look, here are the cliff notes of it. Here are the important things. Just listen and you will either be convinced or not, but we think you will definitely be convinced, and at least you will know what the story is before you have to make these decisions. So I guess that's my final thought, is that I do think that when the time comes, the opportunity is going to be there. I really hope that the Republicans look past the politics of the moment and look at what's important for the country, what's important for our institutions, because these wrongdoing that we have identified here are much more important than any one president, any one Congress, any individuals. This is part of our the infrastructure, the threads of our country that hold everything together. And if they're politicized, woe onto us. So thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'm going to go ahead and end it here. If you guys came late, you can listen to the replay after we end. But yeah, I mean, hopefully, like MB said, I mean, the resources are there. If Congress members are out there and they want to say, hey, what should we be doing? What should we be thinking about? There's a whole bunch of sleuths out there. I mentioned Stephen McIntyre. You can talk to Fool Nelson or Walk of Fire or Hans or Technofog. There's some really, really good researchers out there that have proven themselves. They're not QAnon conspiracy nut jobs. Their work speaks for themselves. And whoever it is, whether it's Jim Jordan, whether it's some other member of Congress, I mean, you can call these guys. You can ask them to keep it confidential. They're not gonna, they're not gonna blast out that they just, had a phone call with you. They're gonna keep it between the two of you, and you can ask whatever you want. And chances are they're gonna have some great information, whether referring you to a document or a series of documents and walking you through point by point. I mean, we have a lot of documents through FOIA, which are not really widely distributed in the public. There's a lot of great research just compiled by some of the sleuths out there that'll lead you to some really good questions, and that's that's one of the big value propositions of the sleuths out there is we don't necessarily have all the answers, but damn, we have a lot of really good questions, and use this. So that's something I post pretty regular. Like, call us up. Like MB said, like, we're not going to charge you. Like, I don't know. So anyway, point's been made. I hope everybody has a good weekend. I think we have Friday left, but other than that, I hope everybody has a good weekend, and I will see you guys next time.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. See you guys.